All righty. Wherever you at listening to Be a Voice Radio Wisconsin Voices, thank y'all for tuning back in. This is Bryan Sanders here, community outreach organizer for Wisconsin Voices. Do want to thank y'all for tapping in every Monday and Tuesday with us. I do want to shout out to everybody across the city that has been out here doing a hustle, getting ready for the holiday season. I see y'all out here on the grind. I want to shout out to everybody out here taking care of these families as well. It's a lot of events going on this past weekend. So shout out to all the organizers and community organizations across the city that were doing their thing in these places. I've seen even this morning, I just seen the Moscow Villard, getting ready. Of course, people are there at the food pantry. So definitely want to shout out to them. Always want to shout out to HKBT and the village for doing their thing over at Atkinson Park as well. Last week we had on a guest from the Hunger Task Force. So we definitely want to shout out to Reno Wright and his team over there at the Hunger Task Force for doing their thing. And everybody that's included in the city that's just doing their small part. I know we've been mentioning and saying it's important for us to get out our comfort zones, get out our silos, as we always say, and just help. If you got the space to do it, go ahead and step out and show some support, show some love to the city during these interesting times. I want to shout out to the WNLV staff real quick. Shout out to Jermaine in the building, Mr. Ride Out, DJ Clark Click in the building. What's going on, y'all? Byron over there in the corner. I ain't seen him in a few weeks. But shout out to you. Feel like a few weeks. How you doing, man?
I'm great.
Thank y'all for tuning in. So we got a guest today. We got two guests, actually. Our first guest right here is Mr. Tim Cordon. Did I say that right, Tim? Did I get it right?
Yeah,
I want to make sure I got that Cordon in there right.
I usually say Cordon. Just
Cordon?
Like Gordon.
Is it Cordon?
Cordon,
Is
yeah.
Cordon? I don't know. I'm giving you the fancy Cordon.
Cordon Bleu.
Cordon. Okay, Cordon. Okay, Tim Cordon. I don't know all this time, man. I'll give you that fancy little Cordon. Cordon.
Cordon. You can be
Cordon.
fancy with me. Yeah.
Tim Cordon. We got Tim Cordon in the building today. So today on Be a Voice, the founder and coordinator of Building Unity, Mr. Tim Cordon, a nonpartisan grassroots movement dedicated to peace, justice, sustainability, and democracy across our state. Tim travels across Wisconsin in the Unity Mobile, connecting communities through town hall style unity gatherings where people come together to build power, plan, and action, and deepen our commitment to civic engagement. He's been a longtime organizer in Madison and beyond, including leading civil disobedience around worker justice, fighting for environmental protection, and building networks that bridge ideological divides. Through Building Unity, Tim helps grow statewide action, alert network, mobilizing people around climate justice, and fights for meaningful systems change and how we govern ourselves. Tim, welcome to Be a Voice. What's going on, Tim?
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
That was a really beautiful welcome. I really appreciate it.
We try to make it sound good.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing about this, right?
We got to sound good. We got to look good and sound good, right?
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you for inviting me to come be on this show.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a great honor to be in Wisconsin, on Wisconsin's first Black-owned radio station.
Yeah.
I got to tell you.
Yeah.
I want to thank the staff here for making this possible.
Absolutely.
So you got a good thing going here, Brian, and it's just amazing to be part of it.
Yeah, thank you. I've been trying to get you in for a while, so I'm glad we was able to get you down here while you were down here doing your work in Milwaukee. So again, thank you for taking the time to come to Be a Voice, Wisconsin Voices. So let's get to the good stuff, Tim, while I got you.
Yeah.
Build Unity lists sustainability as one of your 4 core pillars, explicitly calling out the climate emergency. How do you see environmental justice as being deeply tied to democracy and social equity in Wisconsin?
Well, I mean, basically the climate crisis is way more serious than most people are aware. I mean, the planet is burning up and it's going to just dealing with it, trying to survive it is going to cost us all. It's going to cost in farming. It's going to cost in our energy bills. It's going to cost in major natural disasters that need to be cleaned up after. And it's going to cost in like air conditioning and heating. And I mean, the planet is heating up. And so we've got to figure out, how do we make this equitable and livable? And how do we address it so that it's not as bad as it's looking like it's going to get?
Yeah, I know. I've been looking at a lot of the just the changes in climates, this, and even just some things that we've been blessed with, even the southern states. This is the first time in 10 years that a hurricane has not hit the mainland during hurricane season in United States so far.
Wow.
So yeah, I've seen that the other day. So I thought that was interesting, and I thought about it. They have not had, thankfully, knock on all the wood we can, any hurricane threats over there in the southern. Everything's been shifting.
Wow.
Shifting off. So that was a statistic that I was surprising to see.
May that continue.
Yes, big time. Your organization hosts regular building unity gatherings, bugs as you call them,
Yeah.
across Wisconsin to connect people for action around peace, justice, and sustainability. Can you give an example of a recent bug where environmental policy was a major focus, and what came out of that?
Well, I don't want to. I'd like to just steer away from the environmental focus. Of course, the
That's fine.
environment is important,
Yeah.
but right now we got to find our people.
Okay.
People, and so we're not necessarily focused on the environment. Right now, that seems the major focus is that our democracy is being taken away.
Yeah.
That we've got a lawless government really running the show, and extrajudicial judicial killings happening on the high seas. We got people, our neighbors and friends, being yanked out of their house by masked gunmen. I mean, most people I know feel like we're in a state of fascism, the beginning of fascism, and that authoritarian rule is only getting worse. And so, the environment is important, and we all need clean air, clean water, clean places for our kids to play. But more importantly, right now, we got to find each other and say enough is enough, and let's make sure that we're organized and ready to resist, so that we can keep our communities safe and be there for each other.
Yeah, I agree, and I know we just had an event at the office, and
Yeah.
maybe you would like to share and and talk about that ongoing event that we'll be having through Wisconsin Voices. I even mentioned it last week and told everybody that it's an opportunity for folks to come in and voice, but actually find a place in the community if they want to, find their way to I would say step in slowly.
Yeah.
This would be a space. This is a good space too. So would you mind
Yes.
sharing what that was about and
Thank
how was
you.
that for you?
And I want to say thank you, Wisconsin Voices, for being such a generous and powerful connector and unity builder in our community, across the state. And so, yeah, Wisconsin Voices hosted it at your offices on the 7th floor of the Century City Tower. Is that, I got that right?
Yep,
Yep.
get that right.
And we had our first one in November, on the second Wednesday of November. On the second Wednesday in December, we're having another one. It's a potluck, starts at 6 o'clock. And it was a beautiful, diverse collection of change agents, people who are trying their best within their churches, within their neighborhoods, within their organizations to make the world a better place. And the whole belief and premise of building unity is, if we can come together and do some things together, like gathering and promoting gatherings, that's the first step to us building a united movement that can take back our world. The bottom line, if I may go on a little
Yeah,
bit,
please go ahead.
is that we are currently spending billions and billions and billions and billions, trillions of dollars, more money than any of us can conceive, supporting a rogue military, an oppressive regime that is taking down, countries, and supporting violence around the world. While here at home, people are homeless, they're hungry, they don't have the jobs or the education or the nutrition or the basic housing that they need. And so it's time to keep our tax dollars here at home, addressing our needs, the needs of human beings, and to really support justice rather than promoting killing. So we say the 3 Ps. We're out for people, peace, and the planet. Let's come together. We don't need to be fighting one another for corporate interests around the globe. We need to be helping each other build the kind of beloved community that Dr. King, dreamed of and helped lead us to until his life was taken.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a constant practice to to engage the folks
Yeah.
and bring out the ones that are those silent leaders that we need to bring to the forefront. I'm a firm believer that day by day it's people that's going to step up to the scene and create that energy. We I was talking about it, talking with somebody maybe a week or two ago, and I was saying like we have to, and I think I was it was the interview even with Vic Barnett of Running Rebels, is the organization down here. Somebody you should probably connect with as well. Great guy, runs a long-standing organization here in Milwaukee. But I was saying to him how it's important for us to give that space to these newer folks or these people that want to come into these spaces that haven't been into these spaces yet but are interested in seeing a change in democracy, seeing a change in the planet, seeing a change in civic engagement across different groups, etc. What would you say? We got about 3 minutes left, but what would
Okay.
you say for individuals, or how would you want to see more people? Since we are talking about bringing people
Yes.
into this space, how would you want to see it? What is your vision for that?
Well, get together with a group, whether it's your neighborhood, people in your neighborhood, your friend group, your church, whatever. Get together, get organized, and decide to show up together. Come to our building unity gatherings, find out what other people are doing, contact Wisconsin Voices, find out what they're doing. Wisconsin Voices does a lot of great work with this, like radio station, helping people where they need help, and getting out the vote, and increasing the participatory democracy that we need right now. So there's lots of ways, but I'd say Wisconsin Voices is a great start.
Mhm.
And come to our building unity gathering. We're hoping to keep those going every you know second Wednesday of the month,
Okay.
and maybe even with you. I don't know,
Yeah.
but if not, maybe somewhere else. But stay in touch with Building Unity, and you can find us on the web at Building Unity Wisconsin, all one word, .org. BuildingUnityWisconsin.org.
Appreciate that. Definitely appreciate that. You got any other wrap ups? We got about a minute or so with you. Anything else you want to get out to the people? Anything else that the people should know about you, your organization? I know, like you said, we got the thing coming up, the next event coming up, the next bug event in December.
December 10th.
December 10th, we'll be doing that. December 10th. Outside of that, I think everything is gonna be flowing pretty smooth.
Beautiful. I just want
Yeah.
to re-emphasize something you said, Brian, is about there's a place for everybody. I mean, you were kind of saying wherever you're at, you're welcome here. You may not know anything about politics or how our government runs or what's going on in the world, but if you believe in peace, if you want a clean, healthy environment, if you believe that the human family needs to come together right now and stop killing each other, we'll take you in and we'll find things for you to do and help us build this movement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, and I think that's the best thing, is that you're actually welcoming to new faces every time. And any other groups, before I let you go? Any other groups that were there that you want to shout out?
Oh my goodness, there's so many of mine. I'd hate to leave any out, but
Okay.
there were close to 20 different groups represented at our last meeting. Certainly Souls
Yeah.
and Share the Love, and who else?
Was it was the
NAACP Wisconsin.
environmental something? Was it
Yeah, the
urban
in the
ecology?
spirit of kindness. It's founded this in the spirit of kindness was founded by the same man who ran the Urban Ecology Center.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken Leinbach. So
Yeah.
in the spirit of kindness has been a big support of this effort to unify and bring the people together.
Yeah. So yeah.
So thank you, Wisconsin Voices. I want to shout out to you, number one. Great organization.
Yeah, doing their thing, doing the thing. We
Yeah.
just want to make sure that we support, and as for me being out here, representing on the community side, I just want to make sure that I'm doing the best I can to, provide a space, or at least show some support to organizations like yours and the ones that we work with that are on the ground doing the work. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, y'all. We have wrapped it up. This is Tim Cordon with Be a Voice Radio, Wisconsin Voices Building Unity interview. We'll be back with Colleston Morgan Jr. from City Forward, and we'll be discussing the report card of the state and other NPS and Milwaukee topics. Be a Voice Radio, Wisconsin Voices. We'll see you in a minute. Be a Voice Radio, WNOV 860 AM, 106.5 FM. We are on to our next guest. What's going on, sir? How you doing?
Thanks for having me in.
Absolutely. I got a little bio to read about you before we get to the questions, but I'm gonna make sure that we just make sure we introduce you first. Colleston, right?
That's it.
All right, Colleston Morgan Jr. So today on Be a Voice Radio, we bring it on a Milwaukee powerhouse in education, Colleston Morgan Jr. Born and raised in Sherman Park, is the executive director of City Forward Collective. This organization is fighting to make sure every kid in Milwaukee has access to high quality school. Colleston started out as a social studies teacher and was named Teacher of the Year at G.W. Carver High. He went on to lead major education, work in Louisiana and New Orleans, eventually becoming chief strategy officer for the entire district. He played a key role in returning New Orleans schools to local control and recognized nationally for his leadership in charter school accountability. With degrees from Harvard and the University of Chicago, and as a proud father of two daughters in school, Colleston brings both expertise and heart to the fight for better schools. Colleston Morgan Jr., welcome to Be a Voice Radio. What's
Thank
going
you
on,
so
my
much for
brother?
having me. That's a long introduction. We got showing that up.
Man, you like that? Yeah. Hey, look, yours even on your bio, even on your page was a little long. So I was like,
I
"Ugh,
believe
I don't.
that. We'll get working on that.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you for having me. It's an important conversation.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. So we want to bring you in because I know there's a lot going on. Of course, locally in the state with a lot of the things that's obviously going on with the education. Could you just off the before we even get into some of the interview questions, can you just break down what's the current status for people that's listening so they can be aware of what's going on right now?
Yeah, right. So we got about 108,800 or so publicly funded students in Milwaukee. And I use that term specifically.
Okay.
That includes kids who go to Milwaukee public schools. That's about half of them, 52% this year. That includes kids who go to public charter schools. It's about another 15 or so percent of them. That includes kids who are going to private schools using a voucher. There are about 30,000 of those. And that includes kids we used to call 220. That's just about phased out, but open enrollment kids are going to suburban public schools. So across Milwaukee, about 108,000, somewhere between 108 and 109,000 students who are publicly funded. And the reality is across the board, we've got work to do to improve results. So of those 108,000 kids, about half of them are educated on the north side of Milwaukee, 52,000. When we looked at the numbers a couple of weeks ago that came out from the state, just 15% of them were in schools that we would classify as meeting state expectations,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that means that 85%, right?
Mm-hmm.
More than 8 in 10
Mm-hmm.
are not getting the quality of education that the state says they should deserve. And that's a whole nother conversation about what the state says they deserve versus what they truly deserve.
Okay, so you just broke that down, and that goes right into our next question. Why do you believe Northside Milwaukee continues to lack high quality schools even after decades of data showing the crisis?
We got a habit in the city sometimes of looking at problems, admiring problems, talking about problems, but especially from our leadership, not actually doing the work to solve those problems. And that I don't think that's been more true maybe anywhere than in K-12 education. We know this is true. I just hit 40. I remember having these conversations with my mom in the car about where she was going to send me to middle school and what were the options, and not liking the choices that were in front of her then.
Mm-hmm.
And I know all of us probably have those stories, either, the
Man,
kids and the
plenty of
families
those
in our
stories.
life, right? Like this isn't a new conversation for those of us who grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the numbers are moving in the wrong direction. When we look at the nation's report card and look at the results for Milwaukee, we actually saw scores decline in fourth grade reading over the last 4 years, which means we know this is an issue. We're talking about this issue, but whatever's happening in our political class, we're stuck in fights from 20 years ago. We're stuck in arguments about what type of sector, what type of school. We're not about the work that we need to be about, which is ensuring that every one of our kids can read, write, do math at grade level, be prepared for a life, whatever that life is that they choose. It's going to require high quality education. And right now, far too many of our kids just aren't getting that.
And you brought up something really important. Now, I used to hear that, and I know always the thing, the math and science is a big issue for the nation.
Yep.
But now we're starting to see more and more about the reading is becoming an issue. Now, when we think about the reading, is that just the reading and comprehension is going? If that means that the reading comprehension, because I'm seeing a lot of people, and I hate to say it, just on the internet in general, who are reading stories or seeing stories, and they're reading the stories and they're not comprehending the stories. And it seems like it's been a change. I'm right behind you. I'm 38. I'll be 39 in November.
Yep.
So I'm seeing a change in the way that the young adults are understanding comprehension, even going down into the space of Milwaukee, but seeing it nationally, I can see a difference. Have you seen the same?
Yeah. So, and it starts early, right? We talk about, there's lots of talk now about Act 20 and science of reading, and that's a real conversation when we should have a little bit more. But let me just start here, right? Once you learn to read, you'll be forever free. I'm pretty sure that's Frederick Douglass who said that. For our people, we got a history of knowledge having been held back from us, right?
Yes.
There was a reason they didn't want us to learn how to read. Because once you can read, all the other things that it opens up to you, in education, we often talk about learning to read by second or third grade, because for most of the rest of your educational career, and frankly, for most of the rest of your life, you're reading to learn, right? If you can't read the newspaper or the ballot that's in front of you or the sign at the grocery store, whatever the case may be, right? There's a whole world that's locked away from you. And when we look at what's going on in terms of our students who are learning how to read, I'm actually going to quote something that the superintendent said when she came to town. You could guess randomly and have a better outcome in terms of reading proficiency than some of the numbers we see from students in Milwaukee.
Wow.
And it means that we're exactly what you said. We're not teaching our young people to learn how to read in the right ways. And that's having impacts across their entire life.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, and just to, as serious as you sounded, I mean, it's just the most basic comprehension stuff you like. So I'm understanding, like you said, when it comes to deeper, comprehension levels, when it voting, understanding what's my prescription, when I need to do this and when do I need to make this call. Just the everyday things that we have to.
One of my favorite memories as a parent was the first time, it must have been 2020. My 5-year-old was learning how to read, and we went to Costco to go get some groceries, and she looks up and she's like, Dad, I can read all the labels. And I mean, a world of wonder, right? Because she can finally, then she figured out how much those things cost. And that's a whole nother conversation. But at least she could read it, right? And then she's like, I didn't know what was going on before. Like, that magic and that wonder, like, we can't lose that. Like, it's fun, right, to tell that story. But it's also incredibly important if you're trying to go and shop and figure out how you're going to make the budget and make sure that you got the food you need in your household. Like, you can't move through this world successfully without that basic ability to read, or at least it's a whole lot harder.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, I agree. Just going back into a little bit of the NPS conversation. How has NPS's mismanagement and inconsistent leadership directly contributed to poor outcomes for Northside students?
Ooh, so I got to say two things here. First of all, like, I got to acknowledge the challenges that we face in this city. I gave you the numbers before.
Yeah.
About half of our kids are in Milwaukee Public Schools. About half of our kids are outside of Milwaukee Public Schools. So right. I got thoughts about NPS, and I'll give them to you, and I'm happy to say them. But I also want to be clear. The challenges we face around reading, around math, around ensuring our kids, are educated the way they need to be, they extend beyond NPS. We're not going to solve them inside of NPS, and we're not going to solve them outside of NPS. We all got to have this conversation as a city. Now, that said, NPS is the single largest operator of schools in our city.
Yeah.
And while that number has gone down over time, they're still serving more than half of our kids overall.
Okay.
And we all know, we all have seen over the last year to year and a half, the royal mess that has been going on at NPS around the finances, around the academic outcomes, around HR and operations, you name it. I think we're up to a half dozen different audits that have been dropped on the district. And all of those challenges, the district sneezes. This isn't a district that sneezes, right? This is a district that caught a cold, and we all know what happens to us when everyone else gets sick, and that's been true at NPS, right? Like, there has been no, I've been, on this station, other places, talking about the lack of a plan, talking about the lack of accountability, and all that's real. NPS has work to do to fix its own house. And NPS has got to get serious. And to her credit, I think the new superintendent has started strong in a conversation about, we got to teach kids in NPS to read. These outcomes are unacceptable. That's a different tone than we have heard from that district for a number of years. But it requires that conversation from the superintendent to get matched up with action. And it requires not just the superintendent to be speaking out there, but the board members, to be acting in that same direction. It's got to get down the line into what's happening in the school and a classroom every single day. And while I'm, I see good, hopeful signs in initial conversations out of Superintendent Casilius, she can't do this by herself. And frankly, especially over the last week, some of what we've seen across the rest of the district is quite troubling.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely want to ask you some questions about some of the votes that just went down, and some of the results of that. Looks like we got a caller on the line. This is perfect timing. You open for a call?
Yeah,
you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's get a call going. Are they still on? Caller? Oh, all right. Caller, tap back in if you want to, caller. Call one more time. I don't know. We didn't see you. Colleston was getting popping, so we wanted to make sure Colleston was getting popping, so we want to make sure that he finished that thought. But if you are calling back in, please. There we go. Be a Voice Radio Wisconsin Voices. Okay. All right. So while we do a little bit of the background on the call, we'll just go to the. Are you ready? Okay. Well, we'll go to the call. It looked like he's ready. Be a Voice Radio Wisconsin Voices. You're on.
Good day, fellas.
Good morning.
This is Rick calling you long distance from Germany. It's about 6:30 in the evening here, but the Germans are surpassing us not only in reading but in the sciences. And if you don't teach basic science in the public schools, the children will never know that the moon landings were fake. I'm done, fellas.
Hey, we are going to lose some of the most basic history if we don't correct some of this education, huh, Colleston?
Absolutely. You know, the call is right. You know, education across the board. I taught social studies, so don't, you know, I started with reading and math because those are the foundations.
Yeah.
But across the board, making sure that our kids are getting the education they need. You know, you talk to some of the business leaders in the city. There are 50,000 jobs going unfilled, and our children are
in the city,
or in the region.
Yeah, region. Okay.
And they're not being positioned for those opportunities in part because they're not being prepared the way they need to be prepared in school.
All right. Hey, we 414-444-5253. If you do have any questions for Mr. Colleston Morgan Jr. while we're on the air, going into the next. So the Wisconsin State Report Card, which I definitely want to get to with you on here, shows year after year of failures, and we've seen. I even looked at it myself. I've seen where NPS was, they were below expectations.
They fell from 3 stars to 2 stars. We use 1 to 5 stars. 3 as meeting expectations.
Yeah,
this year their rating fell.
I see Waukesha was going up. They were they're above expectations or something like that, and some other spaces were meeting. Kenosha, I think, was meeting expectations.
Yeah, this is worth taking a minute to talk about because part of what happened here is some changes that happened last year.
Okay.
So, and we at City 4 Collective were pretty loud about this. The state superintendent made a decision last summer, and the way it works in Wisconsin, she can make this decision basically on her own to lower expectations. We used to have standards that were aligned to national benchmarks. NAEP, it's what it's called, the Nation's Report Card. She said, those are too hard. And we used a really specific example. There's a question that was a 4th grade math question that had, you know, essentially the kids you had to identify which kids had odd numbered lockers, you know, in a picture, and then name the kids who had odd numbered lockers. She said that question was too hard for a 4th grader. Now that really got to me personally, because I happened to have a 4th grader in the house last year. And so I handed her the question and, you know, at the breakfast table and, you know, she got it right off the bat. But then when I told her that, you know, 9 and 10 of her peers in Milwaukee weren't able to do that question, that got her mad. Right. And rightfully so.
Yeah, it should. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, so what happened this year when we talk about these report cards, and we got to talk about that through the context of a set of decisions that were made to lower the expectations for what our students are supposed to be able to do. Now, that said, these report cards are still the best thing we've got to see how schools are doing across the board. So we still have to use them. But I got to put that part out there first.
Okay.
And you're right. Even under these lowered expectations, we saw, you know, not every school in Milwaukee, but certainly MPS as a district actually fall back. We saw, you know, some progress at some of our public charter and some of our private schools, but it's hard to sort all that out, right? Part of it is it's a shame that we can't be straight up about who's doing well and who's not doing well because we keep changing the score. Part of it is, even with that, that's really problematic. And, you know, maybe the worst thing of all, we saw about 1,300 more students that were in the lowest rated schools in our city, the 1-star schools that failed to meet expectation. That's a real crisis that we got to address.
Yeah, big time. I was always just having thoughts. I had my own, and I know I was thinking, I think I was talking to somebody in the studio last week, and I was like, there has to be more strategy internally to figure out what some of the more successful schools in the city are doing and how we can get those kids either broken up from these schools and put into new spaces. It has to be some way that we can create a project, not, you know, it as a whole, create a project where we can get these kids to a better education system without it having to be, you know, a tuition issue or something to that extent. It needs to be more grants and more ways to split these kids up into so they can see success of younger kids and younger adults that are doing the thing. And then, oh man, let me follow suit. Let me stop playing dumb. Because some of it can't be just playing dumb, and some of it, lack of from parenting at home. But some of it's playing dumb and not knowing that you got the genetics to be a scientist, but you over here chasing these little young kids in 7th grade, and
you're so right about so much of this. I'm gonna just hit on 2 things that you said. One is what happens outside of school matters every bit as much as what happens inside of school. When we look at the research on this, about half of the outcomes that we see for students, we can't explain based on what's going on inside of the school. And then when you look at what happens inside the school, the biggest piece of that is something called peer effects. Literally, who are you in classroom next to? Who are you learning with? What are, there's lots of things that are tied up in that, right? The socioeconomic conditions of the community that the school is in, and, all those sorts of things. But that's the basic. That doesn't put teachers off the hook. That doesn't put systems off the hook. But it means that all the stuff that we talk about trying to impact is, a quarter maybe of the total outcome. So what we're doing at home as parents, what we're doing, if it's at church, if it's at the barbershop or the beauty salon, wherever it is that you're seeing a child in your life, the library, like all of that matters more than, in ways that we can't even fully capture. The second thing, though, is that we got to get the school part right. And I think you're absolutely right about what you're saying about some of these schools. We've got, 30,000 fewer kids in the city than we did 10 or 15 years ago.
Really?
And the same number of schools. And what that means is that we've got schools on the north side of Milwaukee that have, 116 kids in them, 120 kids in them. High schools built for, 2,000 or 3,000 kids that maybe are serving 300.
Wow.
That's not sustainable. No. And it means that we're spending lots of money and spreading lots of resources way too thin in a way that is not serving our students well. Again, another one where I got to give the superintendent credit. She's starting to have this conversation at Milwaukee Public Schools. And it's a tough conversation to have. You read a bit about my work in New Orleans. One of my jobs in New Orleans was to be the guy to come in and say, this school isn't meeting the mark, or this school isn't meeting its enrollment. And that means that we're going to have to do something different at this school. That's a hard conversation to have. It's a hard conversation because every school is a community. You got people who are investing in it, and you're breaking them up. But sometimes it's a necessary conversation to have. And we haven't had that in the city in the way that we need to. And I will say, right, that's also a conversation where when you bring that conversation, you have a responsibility to not just say, we're going to close the school, but if we're going to make this closure, here's where you're going to go next. And here's how this is going to be a better outcome for you, or at least here are your choices. And here's how these choices are going to be better choices than the one that you're no longer going to be able to access. And I think on both sides of the equation, we've had some misses.
And I think that's sacrificing for the greater good right there. If we got to break them up just to get them, and that's just my personal opinion, if that would make a more successful Milwaukee and more educated Milwaukee, that will be a big step. Looks like you got another caller.
All right.
You're on the Air Be a Voice Radio, Wisconsin Voices. Good morning.
Good morning. My son attends a Milwaukee public school, and a principal emailed us and saying how our report card was outstanding. But I didn't realize that the standards were low. We were celebrating in excitement, but I had no idea it was because the standards were lowered. Is that what the conversation is about?
Yes, that's absolutely it. And that's exactly the challenge. There was a state official who said parents have to, direct quote here, get their hands dirty to understand how schools and students are performing. That shouldn't be the case, right? Like, you should be able to trust that report card is giving you an honest picture, and it's really frustrating that that's not the case, that we got to go back and try to figure this out, right? Like, this is my job and it's hard for me to sort through it. And, we're all trying to be parents too. And, run the after school activities and all these other things. We need to make this simpler and more straightforward for you and for other families to understand.
And my other question would be, if we consolidate all of these schools, the public schools, would that free up the teachers so that we wouldn't have a teacher shortage? And then how we handle some of the schools that have those behavioral issues coming to some of the schools that don't have so much behavior issues. But I would definitely vote if that was to free up some teachers and we wouldn't have a teacher shortage if that was on a ballot.
Now, I don't know that would solve the teacher shortage entirely, but it certainly would let us use the teachers that we have better. And I think you're absolutely right about making sure that we do it in a way that, we talk a lot about culture, and, you've got to be really intentional about making sure that, in other cities, they call it the welcoming school. The school that's taking in new students is prepared for that, right? That you've got the relationships, the adults in the building, the supports that are needed to bring those students out. But this is the conversation that we need to have. What is the system that we need to have for the kids that we have in the system now to ensure that they're served well? And that's going to look different than maybe the system that some of us who grew up here grew up with.
So if we consolidate the schools based on a population, what's the benefit then if it's not going to increase the student-teacher ratio or decrease it rather?
Right. Every district has a fixed amount of money. Here in Milwaukee, taxes went up a couple of years ago to pay for that referendum that was on the ballot in 2024. But MPS is a $1.5, $1.6 billion operation now. If you're doing that over 150 schools versus doing that over, say, 125 or 130 schools, that ultimately means more resources should be able to go to each one of those schools, right? That's the basic conversation we have to have. And then it's how do you use those resources, but more resources and then using those resources in smart ways.
And is the superintendent qualified for those decisions? I know she's getting like $300,000, but is her expertise in that, or would it be based on what the consultants think or the state thinks?
Look,
and I'll hang up and let you go because I'll keep going on and on.
Well, I appreciate all the questions. Yeah,
we appreciate the call in.
I'll answer that last one. I think this is ultimately, these are decisions that have to get made by our school board. The superintendent is hired by the school board, but decisions about closures or consolidation, she's opened the conversation. She said it needs to happen, right? She's looking at the numbers. She sees the enrollment. She's talked about, what it costs her to operate these schools. But ultimately, this board has to make those decisions. And we should probably spend a little bit of time here talking about what this board did last week at one school on the north side. But that doesn't give me a lot of confidence in their ability to make these decisions.
Yeah. We got to take this call real quick. Then we want to come back. We're going to take a break after that. Then we're going to talk about the board situation from last week, too.
Yeah, let's see that.
All right. Be a Voice Radio, Wisconsin Voices. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I was wondering, would they consider more schools that are geared toward all male and then all female schools? That's one thing that would be my question. And then also, would they focus more on the main subjects and have art, physical ed, whatever the other requirements are, more for those that are already doing well, and those that are not doing well, they could have the tutoring time available to them for the other half of the school day, where they could really get help with such subjects as math or reading or science or whatever it is. Would they consider that? And also, for any empty schools or when they consolidate, maybe having a Saturday program of tutoring, or they can choose to put the specialty classes like photography or whatever they do in schools starting at 12 noon, and they can get credit for that by coming there. And that'll keep them off the street running wild, or even training.
Yeah, I can give a partial answer on this. You asked about, I think you mentioned a couple times tutoring, and I do think that's an important part of the conversation, right? We know we got students in Milwaukee now that are not where they need to be academically. And so it's going to require us getting schools right, but it's also going to require us providing some supports to bring those students who aren't where they need to be right now back up to where they need to be. And that's where the tutoring, the after school programs, the Saturday school opportunities, those things matter in terms of, those, we call them interventions academically, right? Like we need some of those interventions to support our students. Ultimately the goal is schools are doing the work such that you don't need to do that, but we are going to have to fill in some of the gaps and the blanks that weren't put together. Now, how we structure those schools, I think that's a good and important conversation. We do have in the private school space, especially, some single gender school options. I think about Notre Dame as a school, for instance, that has a lot of gender separated, learning, and they've seen some great results. So there are options in the city that are publicly funded that are available. Not so much inside of Milwaukee public schools. That's really a question and decision for MPS to figure out. But when you look across the city, we do have some of them available.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. Thank you for the calls. We got a guy in here who knows a lot about this, and if y'all need some questions answered, this would be the time. I know our money is going into this. Y'all money is going into this all across the city, our education. And we got somebody here that is passionate about this. So shout out to you again, Colleston. We're gonna take a break on Be a Voice Radio. We're gonna come back and talk about the vote with the Carmen School from last week, and anything else that you may want to hit.
Let's do it.
We'll be back. Wisconsin Voices, 860 WNOV, 106.5 FM. Bryan Sanders here, community outreach organizer for Wisconsin Voices. Thank y'all for the calls. Thank y'all for tuning in. So we have Colleston Morgan Jr. here. He's been talking about the state of education and the importance of that education in the city of Milwaukee and the surrounding areas. So we had a big vote that went on last week through the NPS board, and the Carmen Street Charter School was renewed only for 1 year. What does that decision signal about accountability, both for charter schools and the NPS?
So let me start by just sort of laying out what happened here.
Okay.
Carmen Northwest, the Carmen Charter School Network operates three schools right now, 2 on the south side, 1 on the north side. And it's that north side campus that was up for a charter renewal.
Okay.
Now, this is work I used to do, so forgive me for being a little bit nerdy for a minute.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, do your thing. We need that. We need that.
Charter is fancy for a contract.
Yeah.
Every charter school, public charter school, it is a public school, but they have a contract, and that contract says you can operate for some amount of time. At the end of that contract, we're going to look and see how you're doing. That's the accountability, right? And based on how you're doing, we're going to either make a recommendation, we'll renew that contract, which means you get to keep serving kids. We may not renew that contract. That's all of this is supposed to be based on the facts and the data, right? You're supposed to look at the numbers and the evidence. And in fact, in this case, MPS just this past year went through a whole process to redo what's called their framework, the way that, essentially the report card that they use to determine if a school should be renewed. Carmen Northwest went through this process. The recommendation was for a 3-year renewal.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got to the school board meeting on Thursday, and I happen to have been in the room on Thursday night.
Okay.
You heard from parents, you heard from the school CEO, you heard from the school principal, you heard from students at the school who had filled that room, 200 or so, about how what the school has meant to them. You heard the school leaders talk about, we got work to do, but we're also making progress, and here's what we're proud of, and here's the work we're going to do to continue to improve outcomes. And then you got to the school board, and you had the school board president, who's not even on the committee, step up and start by trashing the district's own process, saying the recommendation was wrong. She was on that review committee, by the way. You had other board members get up there and say, I will never vote for a non-instrumentality charter school. I'm not even willing to have the conversation because of whatever set of beliefs that they brought to the table, but not based on the facts and the information.
One thing that just not to cut you off, I've seen one of the newer board members have stated that they will never vote for a charter school system in this city.
Two of the newer board members.
Okay, so it's 2 newer. Okay, I've seen one for sure.
And let me just connect this to this voting thing for a minute. Both of those new board members were elected unopposed. Right. So nobody showed up. Nobody challenged them, and so this is what happens.
Yeah,
right?
We get people in there that don't really care about the education and what format they.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
thank you.
That school earned a 3-year renewal under MPS's own framework, and after we got through all of the drama of the last week, which by the way, everybody is now running trying to do whatever to figure out what's going to happen to the school instead of having a predictable process with a predictable outcome. They got 1 year, which better than nothing, but still leaves that school community uncertain. And not only did they only get 1 year, that 1 year got attached with additional conditions that basically said 1 year and don't come back, and we're going to throw you out of this building at the end of next year. So now we've got a school community that's got 18 months to figure out how are they going to continue serving the 500 kids, the 60 or so staff members, all the families, that part of the community. Over there was at 68, 69th and Silver Spring. They got to figure all that out over the next 18 months. They still got to do the work of educating kids in that building every day. And they got to figure out where is the school physically going to be located a year from now.
Yeah.
That's not a good outcome for our city. And one last piece here that I want to make sure I say.
Yes.
This school, they got work to do, and they'd be the first to tell you that. But this school is performing better than half of the schools in Milwaukee Public Schools.
I've seen that it showed that they outperform over 80 schools.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And when you look at schools in sort of a 3-mile or so radius from that campus, can't find one that MPS is operating that performs better. We got work to do on the north side in general, but the last thing we should be doing is pulling out options that are doing relatively better when we got 80 some odd other schools that we need to be looking at in terms of even worse outcomes across our city. We can't find a better option to put those kids in. It's that thing I said before the break. If you're going to close a school, we better have a plan to ensure that those students are going to be served better. And we simply don't have that right now.
Yeah, and that's a concern for me, that the options, you close it. So I was hearing, I don't know, how, if this is accurate or not, but is it true that Carmen Charter School raised 51 million?
They sure did, because this happened a couple years ago with their Southside campus.
Okay.
Those two campuses were thrown out. So yeah, they raised it because they had to build a new building in a rush, because the MPS at the last charter renewal threw the two Southside campuses out of those buildings. And so they are building a new building on the South Side, which may well be what they have to do here on the North Side. I don't think they know yet what the next steps are going to be for them, but that's not easy.
Yeah.
And this, right, like, as we think about the work we need to do in the city, we need to be doing it in a way that makes sense across the board, not making decisions based on ideology and whose politics and small interest groups.
Yeah. It seems more, personal when you see that the kids are getting shortchanged, at the top.
It absolutely is personal, right? And in this particular case, one of the things that is clear is that this school board, unfortunately, the majority, it looks like, on this school board right now just isn't interested in public charter schools, which are an important part of our landscape. I gave you the numbers at the beginning, right? But it's, 16,000 students across our city that are being served in public charter schools. And they put up some of the strongest performance we see across the city. They are accountable. They're accountable in many ways, more so than any other type of school in the city, right? Like, we're having this conversation precisely because that accountability is in place. And we need to trust that the elected officials who are supposed to be making decisions are going to make them based on the facts and the data, not off
Personal feelings.
their personal feelings and politics, especially misinformed politics.
That's real. I appreciate that. So I know they got that much time, but I had to hit you with this. How much we got? 1 minute?
All right, let's see if we can speed round here, right?
Real quick, 1 minute. What would you like for the city of Milwaukee residents to know? I had another question regarding Chicago charters, but I'll have to bring you around or something.
Yeah, we'll come back and do it again.
Yeah. But what would you like for the city to know, or what steps, as far as whatever is the civic duty, understanding of just being aware of what's going on, and more about what should they know about city forest?
It's right there, right? It starts with awareness and understanding, right? It's not easy to understand what we need to do, and so you can check us out online, www.cityforestcollective.org. But get educated, get engaged, show up at the ballot box, show up at your kid's school if you're a parent. The work we need to do is going to start when we start holding our leaders accountable for educational outcomes across the board.
That's real. And look, that's be a voice right there. You can, hey, look, he just told y'all how to be a voice. And I'm thankful to have you on there. And I'm thankful that you took your time today. Colleston Morgan Jr. from City Forward Collective, right? Did I get that right?
You got it all correct.
City Forward Collective. Again, have a great week, sir. To y'all,
appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. To y'all in the studio, thank y'all. Again, Be a Voice Radio Wisconsin Voices. We had Tim Cordon and Colleston Morgan on today, Jr. We'll see y'all tomorrow with Dr. Saquana Taylor to talk about some moves going on the county side. So y'all have a great day. Peace.